Welcome back to the hills. This is episode 2 of my podcast series. And in the first episode, I slightly mentioned and hinted around with turkey tactics here in Appalachia. More specifically, Western North Carolina, the hills of Western North Carolina, simply because that's where I spend the most of my time turkey hunting. And I kind of want to dive into that today. Before I go any further, if you can't tell, I'm pretty congested. I'm just getting over a virus, so bear with me. I'm a little stuffy, so I'm going to do the best that I can and try not to cough up my lungs while we go through this today. So, as I was saying, turkey tactics as a whole here in Western North Carolina, more specifically than anywhere else that I personally hunt in Appalachia, you can get really aggressive. And by really aggressive, I mean you can get away with calling a little extra more. Now, hear me out. When I say that, I'm not saying go out there and every 30 seconds to be blowing a call, okay? What I mean by that is you can get a little bit louder if the situation arises, okay? So obviously I'm contradicting myself here, and it's almost a situation where you have to see it to fully understand it. But I wanted to come and I wanted to tell you a very, very short and sweet and simple of how it's been done. Lately, I've been doing quite a few TikTok lives, and I've had a few questions that have popped up, and I figured instead of, making or answering the same question over and over and over again on TikTok live, that I'd come in and I'd actually make a podcast style of those answers. So first and foremost, let's talk about the calls that are used. So the calls, it's the basic calls wherever you go. And I'm sorry, I don't care what anyone says. It doesn't matter what subspecies you're running after. The principles will apply no matter where you are. It's the finesse. It's the what you're doing in situations A, B, or C that are going to change in ever changing environments, right? So like if I'm hunting thick timber here in Western North Carolina compared to here on my home farm, I'm going to do two completely different things. And then again, I might do the same thing depending on what the turkey himself is doing, right? So a lot of your turkey tactics are going to be based on the turkey that you are pursuing at that time. All right. And I know I'm going around in circles here, so kind of stick with me. I'm just trying to preface this, that everything that I'm about to talk about today is not the gospel. Okay. If I tell you to do this and you take it as the gospel, I don't want you to come back and be like, oh, this dude doesn't know anything that he's talking about. I went and did exactly the way he did it on this podcast, and the turkey wouldn't come to me. This is basically just examples and ideas that if you're in the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains more specifically, Western hills get a little bit different. But if you're in the Appalachian Mountains, I just want to give a few ideas that have seemed very successful to me. I mean, I've got quite a few birds under my belt. Nobody's an expert in the outdoors. Don't let anybody tell you that they're an expert or they're better than the next guy or anything of that nature. This is just simply what has been working for me over the past 10 years, which is when I really turned it on. Was about 10 years ago. I started just slamming them and tagging out in multiple states. But this is what works for me. All right. So if you're brand spanking new to turkey hunting, which a lot of my viewers on TikTok Live are, you might be wondering, well, what kind of calls should I even get, right? So we're starting at the very bottom here. So if you are pretty proficient in calling, you might want to go ahead and fast forward through this podcast a little bit, and we'll get into some tactics later down the road in it. but what calls do I need? And that's kind of a unanswerable question, okay? Because it depends on what style of hunting, and not even what style of hunting, but like what you feel comfortable with doing. I'm a firm believer in getting proficient with a diaphragm call, for many, many reasons. I believe that a diaphragm call is going to be the most versatile, and also, I'm not going to say the easiest to use, because it's definitely not the easiest to use, but it is in terms of being able to control it from a vast array of volumes, of pitches, of sequences, with practice. Now, all your calls are going to take practice. And a lot of people do struggle with diaphragm calls. And I might actually start, even though I said I wasn't going to, I might start doing like just some very basic tutorials for anybody who might be jumping in. That's brand spanking new to the call game. And if you'd like that, leave me a comment down below. Just comment new down below. And if I see a bunch of comments that say new down below, I'll start putting out those tutorials here in the near future. So diaphragm call. And if you're watching this and you're not listening to it, here I've got quite a few diaphragm calls in this little tin right here. Now, full disclosure, I am sponsored by Appalachian Custom Calls, and I'm always going to endorse Appalachian Custom Calls. The great part about Jonathan is he builds high quality without absolutely draining your wallet. Okay, so you're going to buy a mouth call from him for $7. You get the quality anywhere else you're paying $15 or up. So www.appalachiancustomcalls.net if you want to go check him out. And again, that, like I said, full disclosure, I am sponsored by him. So there's that off of the rap sheet, if you will. And then moving on to a friction call. Okay, so when I'm talking to someone brand spanking new, I'm always going to advise starting with a box call. Okay, a box call is going to give you the truest of sounds, if you will. And I believe Michael Waddell once put out a video that said, like, if you're having a hard time with your diaphragm call, always revert back to your box call. And I believe there's a lot of truth and validity in that, because a lot of times if I'm having a hard time with my front end yelp on my diaphragm call, I'm going to come to my box, because I can get that full range on that yelp, from that real high pitch all the way down to that yelp sound at the end of a yelp. So I'm a very firm believer, if you're only going to grab two calls and you want a friction call to get, let's say, loud with, and you want a diaphragm call to close the deal with, I'm always going to suggest a box call, and then obviously diaphragm calls. Okay. Other calls that you can go with, you've got your pot calls, you've got trumpet calls, which I actually don't have a trumpet call or run one. You've got the scratch boxes that you can still find. They make all sorts of turkey calls. My tip to you, keep it as simple as possible. All right. I will typically run with a glass and a slate, and probably about 4 or 5 different diaphragms. Mostly the only reason I run that many in my vest, honestly, is for the times that I lose them, because I do oftentimes lose them. That's on me. I got to fix that part of myself. Excuse me. And my locator calls, which I'll get to here in a minute. And that's basically all I keep in my vest at any given time. Now, I do believe you should keep some different calls in your vest. I believe that And I believe it because I've seen it, that some turkeys just won't respond to a certain call. We don't know enough about turkey vocalizations to know exactly what that tom is listening for. But I do know that, and I do full-heartedly believe that toms are listening for a specific sound at specific times, whether it's more high pitch, whether it's more rasp, whether who knows what it is, more volume, less volume. I don't know. I don't have the answer there. A biologist maybe would, and maybe one day I'll get a biologist on here and we can just go down the rabbit hole of turkey vocalizations. But I am a believer, a very firm one at that you should have at least 2 different types of calls in your vest at any given time. And like I said, keep it simple, a diaphragm call and some sort of friction call, whatever you're most comfortable with. Me personally, the 2 that I'm running back and forth between the most is going to be a pot call and my diaphragm call. If I haven't said that already, I keep a box call in my vest at all times, but I'm usually using that when I'm getting more aggressive, which is the point of this conversation. But we'll get to that here in just a minute. And then, optional but helpful are locator calls. So here I have an owl hooter and a crow call. Now, you can learn how to do both with just your natural voice. And I highly recommend that you learn how to, because it doesn't have to be perfect. All right. You don't have to sound exactly like a barred owl to get that shock gobble. Okay. You don't have to sound exactly like a crow. You just have to be in that pitch range. And it's going to trigger that instinct within inside that turkey to be able to get him to gobble and give away his position. All right. And we'll get into the sequence of calling and how I like to do it here in just a moment. But at the end of the day, these are all just tools, okay? So keep that in mind as we go through our conversation today. These are just tools, right? What's the most important aspect behind all of this is the person using them, okay? So with any tool, you need to become proficient with it, okay? I'm not going to go to a construction site and get on a D6 dozer, right? A Cat D6 dozer, if I've never stepped foot inside of a dozer and expect to be proficient with it, right? It takes time, it takes learning, it takes getting comfortable. I just put a video out a couple weeks back here on my YouTube channel about how to become more proficient with turkey calling. And if you haven't watched it, I would suggest giving it a look. But basically, in a nutshell, my tip was to live with a turkey call, and I was mostly speaking of diaphragm calls, but it directly correlates with any type of call, but to have it in your possession as often as possible. Okay, and if that means only 15 minutes a day, then so be it. Only 15 minutes a day that you can do it. But to practice as often as possible and be consistent with it, right? From deer season, from the end of deer season until the start of turkey season, I'm running calls to the point where I annoy myself. And I honestly believe no matter how skilled of a turkey caller you are, you should be spending that much time at least every year practicing and preparing for turkey season. And it's not because you need to sound the absolute best, all right? You don't have to be a Grand National caller to call and kill a turkey. You don't. I don't care what anyone tells you. You do not have to be that proficient. What you do need to be is confident in yourself. Because if that turkey's within 100 yards, right, and you're not confident in yourself enough to either make a move, or you do make a move and you butcher it, for a lack of better words, you're going to ruin what is supposed to be a fun activity for yourself and potentially burn yourself out on it, right? So, like I said, spend as much time as you can and become as proficient as you can. You don't have to be perfect, but you do want to strive to be proficient, okay? So moving forward, that's for if you're just starting out. Moving forward, let's say you've got it down. You're confident with your calling abilities. You've been calling them in wherever, okay? We'll call it flatland for lack of better words here. And you come to the Appalachian Mountains and you want to give your hand, you want to put your name in the hat on trying to seek out one of these stubborn mountain birds, okay? How do I and the people that I hunt with do it? So, let me run you through basically a whole day. And it starts the day before. And honestly, it starts weeks before, months before, even years before. The first thing I'm going to try to do, and what I always, and it doesn't matter what you're hunting, what I believe is the most important aspect of any hunting, is I'm going to scout, right? I can't call a turkey that's not there. So whether that means I'm driving by fields or putting boots on the ground and walking through whatever woodlot or public or even private farm that I plan on hunting, I'm going to spend that time scouting. I'm going to locate birds because there's nothing to hunt if there's nothing there. So scout. Okay, that's all leading up to the evening before a hunt. The evening before a hunt, typically and ideally, I am going to try to roost a turkey. Right, I'm going to try to figure out where one is going to sleep at, and I'm going to do that multiple different ways. It could just be I go stand in the middle of the field and listen because I know they're going to talk and they're going to give away their position, which is exactly what I do here at the home farm. Home farm here, those not typical hunting of Appalachian Mountains. If I get one roosted, my next morning's pretty easy because I'm basically just going to slide on in to where that turkey was and I'm going to start working them from there. If I don't get one roosted, what am I doing then? So I've done my scouting. I know there's turkeys somewhere in the vicinity. I just don't know exactly where. I show up. I wait until right before daylight. Okay. Right before gray light starts to break in. And I get myself situated in a relatively turkey-ish area. So I know that I've seen sign. I know that I've seen turkeys. I've heard turkeys, whatever the case is. I always prefer to see the animal itself. But regardless, I will go off a sign if I haven't seen the animal. And that's where my locators come in. Early in the morning, I'm always going to start with an owl hooter. Crow's not really going to get them fired up around here in the morning. If you're lucky enough for a crow to get them fired up before 10 o'clock, good on you because, it's much louder and you can get it to reach much further. However, here, I'm definitely going to be ripping a barred owl call, okay? And I'm not necessarily trying to get the turkey to gobble at that time. So this is not the point where I want to start getting aggressive. This is the point where I want nature to do what nature is going to do. And I want nature to tell me the course that it wants to take that morning. Because you got to remember, a turkey is not on your time. A turkey does not care that you have to be at work at 10 o'clock. A turkey does not care that a rainstorm is coming in. A turkey does not care that you didn't sleep good the night before. A turkey's going to do what a turkey's going to do. So I try to let nature just run its course. Okay. So as I said, when I'm running an owl hooter, whether it's the call or I'm doing it with my natural voice, I am more or less trying to get the other owls in the area fired up. If a turkey hits off of it, first thing, great. I'm not going to complain about that. But if a turkey does not fire off of it, I'm not just going to freak out and run right there. I'm going to keep playing my owl hoot until hopefully I get some owls fired up. Now, I'm not going to waste all morning there. If I've been there for about 30 minutes and nothing's talking whatsoever, I'm probably going to go try to get on somewhere else. And oftentimes, if I'm going into a new piece that my scouting is not 100% locked in on, that's going to be the case where I'm going to have to bounce from spot to spot to spot to spot, sign to sign to sign to sign, until I finally find either that owl that wants to talk back to me, or I run into that golden ticket of a gobbler that just fires one right off the limb. So I get him struck. Okay. He gobbles at whatever, whether it's me or the other owls that I got fired up, or maybe he just gobbles because he's a turkey and he wants to gobble. And a lot of times that will happen, especially in the spring woods, right? Now, this is all directly for spring turkey hunting. Fall tactics are a little bit different, and I honestly don't fall turkey hunt. I'm not a big fan of it. I have done it. I'm just not a big fan of it. So this is directly towards spring turkeys. So again, he's gobbling. Okay. Now I have to make some decisions. I have to, and this is the really hard part here in these hills, I have to determine how far away he is. And I have to do that because I have to decide if I need to make a move on him before I start actually working him. Okay. Mind you, I have not made a single turkey noise at this time. I haven't clucked, I haven't purred, I haven't yelped, nothing. And I want to keep it that way until I'm 100% sure that I don't need to make massive moves on him. There's a reason for that. So a turkey's biology is, as a tom, he's going to gobble. He's going to set himself up on a high perch. He's going to, or basically an observation post, right? So he's going to sit up on top of a knoll, out in the middle of the field, wherever it is that he thinks that he can project his voice and be seen. So if that turkey gobbles at me 120 yards away, 200 yards away, whatever, and he is in the correct spot, and I am not, and I start talking to him, his biology says, you come to me, I'm not coming to you. So I would much rather, instead of trying to defeat biology, let him give away his position before I give away mine, so I can make the correct move before we start playing our cat and mouse game. Which brings me to what I think in turkey hunting is the most overlooked aspect of turkey hunting. So I've got him to gobble. I have determined he's 150 yards over the hill. I have scouted, so I know the lay of the land. And I know that if I were that turkey, I would want to be in position X, which is right here. Okay. Since I know the lay of the land from my scouting, I know that he's not going to come down from X to here. So I need to work around and find myself, and here it comes, a setup position. finding a setup is going to be more important than any calling you will ever do. So I know that this podcast is about turkey calling, but I want to take just a moment and go over a setup. So here in the hills, if you're in the woodlands, like some dense forest or even some, young forest that's got a lot of thick underbrush, you have to take all that into consideration. There's a lot of stuff around here that turkey's simply not going to go through. There's a lot of stuff around here a turkey can pitch across. So I have been in situations where I have watched a turkey pitch from one side of a valley to another, and we're talking a 300-yard flight, simply because he knows that a hen is over there. So you have to take those things into consideration too. And you're not going to learn how to do that through a podcast or a YouTube video. That takes a lot of time, and going back on that scouting takes a lot of scouting to understand the lay of the land and the capabilities that turkey may or may not have of getting around you. Prime example, last year I was hunting on the side of a lake, and I hunted this bird for 4 mornings in a row. And 4 mornings in a row, I would get him on one side of the cove. He would gobble like crazy. I'd be within 20 to 40 yards of his tree, just on the other side of the knoll. And then about 3 hours later, I would hear him way over to basically my northeast. And I couldn't figure out how he did it. So on that 4th morning, I decided I was going to pop my head up over that hill and watch what he was doing. And this dude was actually pitching out and across and making a horseshoe around the cove and coming up onto the other side of the property. So those are things you have to take into consideration as well. So there's not one specific setup that's going to work in every situation. You've got to put in your time. You've got to gain those woodsmanship skills. And that's not that's not something, like I said, that you're going to learn on a podcast or through a YouTube video. That's time in the woods and trial and error. But let's say this is the perfect morning. You know that this bird has pitched down to his strut zone for the past 5 mornings. You know exactly where his strut zone is. You know that you can get within, let's call it 80, 90 yards of it without being seen. Okay? Without pie facing him. So you work into there. Ideally, you want to be set up in a position where he has to come over, let's say, a hill or an obstacle around a briar patch, whatever the case is. You want him to have to come over something or around something to be able to locate the hen that you are inevitably going to be emulating to him. You want to be close enough that when he comes to check on you, you are within range of him, but far enough away that he doesn't think that, hey, you're close enough to make your commitment to me, I'm not coming over there. So, prime example, last year, the first bird that I took here last year, there was a little bitty fence line that had just the smallest little break in it. And I'm talking, it was basically briar coming down one way, briar coming down the other way, and a little break in the briar. And I basically put that about 30 yards out in front of me, where I knew that a turkey, if they really wanted to commit to this hen, was going to have to poke their head through that break in the fence line to be able to figure out where that hen was and to put on a show for her. And it couldn't have worked any better. Honestly, I wish I had it on film. It was raining that morning. I kind of wish that I had risked the camera, because that was the perfect example of what a perfect setup is, where I basically put myself in a situation that the turkey had to put himself in a situation to poke his head through that hole to be able to see where that hen was, strut up and get her to come to him. And then the rest is history, and I ended up knocking him down. Obviously, you need to worry about your backdrop and your cover, but most importantly, that is what I would suggest you focus on, is being set up in a position where the turkey has to come and he has to check out where you are within range of your gun. Now, if you've got a 40-yard gun, a 50-yard gun, you're comfortable with the shot, and that's what you want to do, by all means, do it. Me, personally, I'm a 40 and in guy. So all my setups, I'm basically setting it up so he has to come within 40 yards to come to me. So I get the question a lot, so how do you hunt fields then? And fields are a little bit different, and I typically do not hunt fields. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to discuss fields here, but just know that fields are a little bit different. Obviously, if you've got a 300-yard field, you're not going to go off that tactic, and that's also another reason I'm not a big fan of fields. Not saying you cannot kill them in fields. People do it every day of every turkey season that's ever existed since the beginning of turkey hunting. But it's just not the way I like to do it. And I've done it, and that's how I know that I don't like to do it. But it's a totally different ball game when it comes to fields. So setups, yeah, like I said, that's going to be your most important aspect. Backdrops, like I said, they are important. I'm typically looking when it comes to something as a backdrop. Obviously, I'm going to look for a big tree. If I'm in a relatively young forest where the trees are 60 years or younger, and I'm a pretty thick dude, so if there's not a tree wide enough, I'll look for a crop of trees, or even a blowdown that I can get in the root ball on, or anything of that nature. And then try, if you've got the time, if you have the time, trying to actually hide yourself from the front. I think we get this false sense of how good our camo is. And this is not to start the camo wars of 2025, because I don't care what camo you rock. There is no such thing as the perfect camo. You're never going to match exactly what you're set up on. Let me not say never, but most of the time you're not going to match to a T exactly what you're set up on. So trying to break up, and even if that just means you find the top of a tree that blew over and you sit in it, whatever it is, without taking away your shooting opportunities and your shooting windows, but to be, being able to basically make a makeshift blind on the fly, another woodsmanship skill that I believe everybody should learn. I was fortunate growing up. We always played, and I don't know if you can actually say this anymore, but we played the game Cowboys and Indians as a kid, which is distasteful now, apparently. But we built forts and things of that nature out in the middle of the woods. And I believe that translated over into my hunting life of being able to make a real quick, hasty blind, just to basically break up my silhouette. And another factor, or another aspect that I am trying to achieve every time I'm not 100% successful, is finding shadows and putting the sun to my back. Right. So if you go out and go out with a friend or a family member and have them sit in a shadow with the sun to their back, tell me how hard it is for you to see them. Right. It's going to be the same concept with a turkey, where if I can find a shadow, that's just more camouflage for myself. And if I've got that sun to my back, and preferably in their eyes, it makes it that much harder for them to see my movements. You do have to be careful, obviously. Like me, I run a camera all the time. Or if you have optics on your sights, making sure you're not getting that optics on your gun, pardon me, making sure that you're not getting that flash through coming through and giving your position away. But those are two things also that I'm seeking for in my setup. So if there's anything that I could, that is more important than any of it, it's going to be your setup and your scouting, right? Those are the two most important aspects. And notice we still have not talked about turkey calling. Okay. So with that said, how am I calling him in? And this is probably one of the most unanswerable questions in all of turkey hunting. Because you're going to hear from a million different people, a million different scenarios, and a million different, this is the way you call them. And the truth is, play it by the attitude of the bird. So when I mentioned you can get aggressive here in these hills, for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's because they're so used to having to vocalize themselves in a loud manner because they're, kicking their voice through all these hollers and all these valleys that we have. Or maybe if it's just they're like me and they hang out around equipment too much and they're losing their hearing. But I've noticed with these turkeys around here that you can get pretty loud with them. So, and I'm not saying just rip a box call when he's 60 yards away. Please do not take that the wrong way. But I do tree talk a lot in the morning. If I know if I'm up underneath one's roost tree, or I'll do a little cluck and purr situation if I've got some hens on me. But that turkey that I was just talking about that I brought through that fence row, when he was 40 yards away from me, I used a slate call and basically ripped it on him to convince him, hey, I am still over here behind this fence row. Come pick me up. And he came to me on a string. That doesn't work in every situation, okay? There are definitely times where I've had a tom working from 100 yards away. I heard him gobble. And then 20 minutes later, I heard a spit drum. And I knew he was looking for me, but I also knew just from sensing his attitude that if I called to him too loudly, it would blow it out in that moment. So that was one of those times I gave a little purr and scratch in the leaves, and it did the trick. And I know this is kind of like, hey, this is how you do it. You figure out how to do it. But that's basically what I'm trying to explain is you have to be willing to go out there and figure out what works for the turkeys in your area. And I think that is one thing that drives me absolutely up the wall is I see successful turkey hunters, and I'm not bashing them because they obviously know what they're doing, but I think they keep preaching that it's their way or no way at all. And I don't believe that is the truth. I don't think that is true because I can drive an hour and 20 minutes away from where I am sitting right now. And the turkeys that I have to hunt that I get to hunt in Eastern Tennessee, I have to work them a completely different way than I do here in Western North Carolina. Or when I go down to the flatter regions of South Carolina, I have to work them differently than I do both Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina. So when you are going to a new location, give yourself the grace and the leniency to mess a couple turkeys up. Now, I'm not suggesting you go out there and act like a hooligan, especially on public land, and ruin it for everybody, Turkeys do become call shy. I don't care what anyone says. If a turkey can correlate a call to a human, he will instantly become call shy. Now, how does he do that? There's many, many different ways, but basically, don't go out there and intentionally mess it up is what I'm getting at. But give yourself the grace that you don't know that area. You don't know what that turkey's feeling on that particular morning, and you can and probably will mess up quite a few. I know I have. There's going to be people with the holier than thou mentality that are going to say, no, don't listen to this guy. I haven't messed the turkey up and such. Okay, good, dude. I'm happy for you. That's awesome. But if you're going and you're traveling to new places, guess what? That means new challenges, new obstacles that you're going to face, whether it's terrain features, different aggression of bird, a more aggressive bird, like you could go and not call enough and that turkey lose total interest in you and then turn right around and go 30 minutes down the road and go, okay, well, I'm going to pick the calling up today and overcall, right? Here in this general, mountainous region, don't be afraid to get louder than you typically would in a flatter area. I always suggest starting soft. I would never, ever suggest to someone just to rip a box call first thing. Okay. Start with, even if it's just a little slate call, start with some purrs, start with a few clucks, start with, something just gentle, just for the off chance that there's a bird standing 50 yards away from you. And then if nothing's talking, rip that thing, man. Have some fun with it. Let it go. Give it a good 2-minute sequence and then just shut up for about 15, 30 minutes. See if anything happens. I don't think that you should limit yourself to a specific style, volume, sequence, method of calling. I think you should be willing to go out there and give everything a shot at least once when you're going out to a new region. Now, when I'm calling, the only thing that I would say that I would keep set in stone every single time I make a turkey noise is to be sure that if a turkey responds to you, you can sit down instantly. So if I'm going up there and, it's like 11 o'clock and I'm not using a locator, I'm trying to strike a bird up with my box call, I'm not going to stand out in the middle of an open field and start ripping on that thing. Because what happens if that turkey gobbles right there at the wood line? Well, I just made that turkey call shy because I guarantee you he can see me standing in the middle of the field. And now he's, correlated turkey calls to humans. So if I'm calling, I typically want to be in a setup, or if not in a setup, at least in a place where I can get down, hunker down and hide. Even if I'm not able to kill that bird, if that bird just, waltzes by and keeps on going and isn't alerted and just thinks, that hen must have boogied out of here, that's still not a loss in my eyes. Do I personally do that every time? No. I need to practice what I preach a little bit more in that scenario, because that one has actually bit me quite a few times. I have an example from last year. I was on my leased property, and I was working the road, just walking up the road and calling, and I came around this bend. Well, I came up to this bend in the road that was basically looking down over a valley, and I hit my my box call. And as soon as I hit my box call, I got this gut feeling that something was about to not go my way. And sure enough, as soon as I hit it, I heard a gobble 30 yards away from me. around the bend. The turkey was standing right there in the road. And before I could get peeled back to a tree to hide, he had made his way around the corner, saw me, and he was out of there. So nevertheless, I never saw that turkey again that last year. So that's just a little food for thought there. If you are going to blind call, or even if you're working up on a bird, make sure that when you call, you have a setup or somewhere to hide. So that kind of all brings me, that ties it all into the most important aspects of turkey hunting to me, which I've already mentioned: the scouting and the woodsmanship. And I believe that those are the most impactful and the most important tools that you're going to have in your belt. No turkey call, no locator call, no TSS round, no shotgun setup, no anything, no camouflage is ever going to replace scouting and woodsmanship skills. And if you only gain one of those two things, woodsmanship skills, by far the most important thing. But that's not an overnight success story. Okay, it took me 2 seasons before I harvested my first turkey. And mind you, I had been deer hunting for quite a few years before I started turkey hunting. So I had built up a very small, but nevertheless, a bit of woodsmanship skills under my belt at that point in time. But that's my point is, if it takes you 4 seasons, if it takes you 6 seasons, if it takes you 10 years to harvest a turkey, who cares? Enjoy it. Enjoy the process. Don't become jealous or envious of the people that you see harvesting animals on Instagram and Facebook and here on YouTube, wherever the case may be. Don't try to find shortcuts either. There's not a single call tutorial or call company or hunting method, whether it's reaping or decoys or anything of that nature, that is going to make you a better woodsman or woman. Time in the woods is the only thing that makes that happen. And the journey of it is the actual teacher. Okay. I know a lot of different calls and call sequences on a diaphragm call. And I only use a couple of them when I'm actually hunting, because the woods taught me what the woods want to hear. You don't have to and you shouldn't want to rush the process. Okay. That to me is honestly the beauty and the fun of turkey hunting, because, deer hunting, and I say this lightly, so don't get bent out of shape about what I'm about to say here, but if you want it to be, deer hunting could be a bunch of luck. Okay. You find the slightest bit of deer sign, you put a stand up on it, and you hunt it day in and day out in big monotonous timber, and day in and day out and day in and day out. And eventually you're going to be able to harvest something. And I guess you could say the same for turkey hunting, but turkey hunting through calls, it's a lot of learning what works in your area with your birds and what doesn't. And I believe that, me personally, that's how I prefer to hunt them. Okay. It is through calling them. And, if you've listened to this podcast and you're like, you know what, I thought I was going to get into calling them this year, but nope, I'm not doing that anymore. That's fine. But to me, I think that defeating the natural biology of a wild turkey is why I enjoy the hunt so much. I don't even have to be the one on the gun. And honestly, that's, I think, the only reason that I rush to get my tags filled every year is so that I can call turkeys in for other people so I can just sit back and watch the show, because I love that. I love that aspect of turkey hunting. I love figuring out what it is that he wants me to say to him to convince him that, hey, my biology is wrong. I'm going to go check on her real quick. And then, the rest is history at that point in time, obviously. But I believe that is probably one of the most amazing things that an outdoorsman or woman can do in nature, is to call to an animal and convince it to do something that biology says is wrong. Are there other ways to hunt? Obviously. And I get asked all the time, like, do you hunt with decoys? And that brings me back to my field example that I was talking about earlier. Like, yeah, if I'm in a field, like if all I have to hunt for a particular day, like here, if I know that all these turkeys are doing here on my home farm is hanging out in the fields, yeah, I'll set a decoy up. I'll set like a feeding hen and a half strut Jake up, and call to them and hopefully have that Tom that's just like, absolutely not, these are all my girls, and he comes down there wanting to fight. Or other times that I might do it is if, I've got kids with me, or even if I'm bow hunting. Bow hunting, a lot of times I will take a decoy in, and I usually don't take more than one at that point in time. I typically just take a hen, and my only reason I'm taking it is to hopefully distract that turkey for a split second, just so I can get my bow drawn back if he gets a sneak on me and I don't have an opportunity to draw on him. And then, some people even hunt out of blinds, and even though that's not my thing, I mean, I will hunt out of a blind, but basically those same three situations I'll hunt out of a blind. So if I've got a kid with me, like my kids this year, I bought a blind for them in hopes that both of them get their birds this year. And then I'll hunt out of a blind if it's like raining and I just want to go hunt in the rain. I wish I'd have took a blind with me last year for that bird that I killed in the rain. That way I could have filmed it, but it just happened so quick that didn't get to happen. And then, like if I, for whatever reason, want to go on an evening hunt, and I know it's going to be slow, there's not going to be much calling going on, then I'll go hunt out of a blind. But 99.999% of the time, I prefer to call them. And if you ever get the opportunity to come hunt with me, or if you watch any of my hunting videos that I'm going to post this spring, I'm not the best turkey caller. And I've been saying that since the beginning of this video. I just figure out what they want to hear and when they want to hear it. And basically, all of this wrapped up in a nutshell is, don't get so wrapped up on what your favorite turkey hunter does or says to do or says that he or she does. And that's not me bad mouthing them now, because there's a lot of people out there that have killed a lot more turkeys than me, and they figured out the secret, their secret sauce. But are you them? Are you, Shane Simpson, Dave Owens? Are you any of those guys? I'm not. If you are, so be it. And if you are, you probably aren't even watching this or listening to this podcast. But if you're like me and you're just the average person that wants to be able to be successful, and you're planning on coming to these hills, come down here or up here, depending on where you are, or over here. Scout. start soft. Don't be afraid to get loud, and don't be afraid to mess one up. You will figure it out a lot faster than you think you will. A turkey, this is going to be a weird way to explain this, but for you dudes, a turkey is kind of, it's kind of like your wife, okay? If you're saying the right things are probably going good for you. If you start saying the wrong things, she's probably going to shut down on you. Now, obviously, that was very, very stereotypical. So wives that may or may not be listening to this, don't get offended by that. But you get where I'm trying to come from with that. Like, the turkey will tell you if you're telling him what he wants to hear. And then if you start telling him too much, he's just going to not talk to you anymore. Now, where I do start to agree with people, okay? If you've got a turkey that is absolutely fired up, I mean, he's hammering and he's coming to you and he's hitting it on every stroke, you do not need to be calling to him on every single stroke, okay? If you strike one up, he's 300 yards away from you, you call to him again, he's 250. You call to him again, he's 200, and then he starts hitting it on every footstep. Stop talking. You've already convinced him. He's coming to you. If you strike one off the limb, okay, and you're in a good enough setup, don't overcall in the morning. That is one thing that I have noticed. No matter where I am in the nation, they will figure out real quick that, hey, why is there one sole hen on the ground? And 99.9% of the time, if you're set up around his roost tree, he can probably see the ground of where that hen should be or should be headed to. So those are the two times I will agree with just about anybody on the internet about overcalling. Of don't overdo it there. You will more than likely do more harm than good. You'll see, and that is where, like, if you're a new turkey hunter, I strongly advise you be careful how much you try to emulate of what you see on hunting videos, be it here on YouTube or, on TV or whatever the case is. But you see a lot of times, like, these big names where the turkey's just cow, cow, cow. And every time he's doing it, that hunter is, yelping back at him. Yelp, yelp, yelp. And he's cow, cow, cow. One of two things is happening there. Either A, you're getting duped because that's B-roll footage that they're putting in on top of it for the cinematic effect of it, or B, they're risking it for the biscuit for that film. Most of the time, and I'm not going to tell you how I know this because I don't feel like throwing anybody under the bus, but most of the time it's the first where they're throwing that B-roll footage over the top of it. Is it kind of shady? Yeah, it's really shady. But at the end of the day, that's their livelihood. That's what they got to do. They got to make a video that's going to sell to the masses, right? So if it looks zhizhed up, for a lack of better terms, it probably is. Okay. The whole concept of, just screaming to him on the limb. Nah, I'm not a big proprietor of that, because in nature, how many times have you heard hens just absolutely screaming on the limb? They typically don't get going crazy until that fly down cackle, right? So that's my 2 cents on that. Now, obviously, I can and have been wrong many, many times, but that's a pretty tried and true form of which you wanna lay back on your calling in that situation, even here in the Appalachian Mountains. So take that or leave it, however you will. Listen, I know I've been running my mouth about a whole lot of nothing, but the biggest thing I want you to take away from this entire conversation is don't be afraid to be your own turkey hunter. And don't, if you are someone who has figured it out, don't be the guy or gal that goes out there and causes frustration to a new turkey hunter who's trying to figure it out by saying, well, if you're not doing it this way, you're not really turkey hunting. Because at the end of the day, a turkey hunter is someone who goes out and pursues turkeys. That's all a turkey hunter is. So if you're going out and you're pursuing turkeys, you're having fun doing it, you're being grateful to your creator, you're learning something every time you go out, you're a turkey hunter. You're part of this crazy brotherhood of people that are obsessed over a bird with the brain the size of a pea. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And don't get locked in on any one person's way of doing it. That includes mine. If there's anything that I can do to help you guys out, please feel free to comment down below. I love trying to give advice, but I don't want to steer someone away from a path that they would have preferred to take in the woods. I hope you gained something insightful. I know that I was very vague, and I did that intentionally. But I hope it kind of opened your eyes up to what turkey hunting here in Appalachia is. I hope that you can see that you don't have to worry about having all the answers if you want to come hunt these mountains. You just have to be willing to come here and put in the work. And it's a lot of work, I'm not going to lie, but it's worth it. Excuse me. If you got any useful information out of this, please hit that like button, subscribe. It helps me out, and it lets me know that you guys are liking what I'm bringing to you. If you didn't like it, please feel free to leave me a comment and tell me that you disagree with me. We can have civil conversation. I am never against that. But either way, thank you guys for stopping by. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm really enjoying this new form of videoing and the whole podcast thing. Like I said, I'm going to be bringing you more later down the road. I'm also still going to be doing my vlog style videos. So if you are one of the few that have been tuning into that, don't worry, that's not stopping anytime soon. But I'm definitely liking this. So if you've got any ideas of what you would like to hear me talk about, also feel free to comment about that. And until next time, we'll see you on the hill.